Good Monday morning, everyone, and welcome to No More Mondays podcast. As always, I am your host, Angie Calland, here to help you kick off the week with inspiration to live and work more authentically. Y'all know how much I love to talk about business, and a big part of this show is bringing you both inspiration and action to help you start, grow, and scale your businesses or even your career sustainably. Today, we're going to take a little bit of a different approach. I often say that successful entrepreneurship is 80% mindset. So we're going to go there. We're going to dive deep into the mental fortitude it takes to build and sustain a business. Enter Justin Scheck. I'm fairly certain we were separated at birth and placed on opposite sides of Pennsylvania, which is one of the reasons that we clicked immediately upon a 20-second introduction at an event a few months ago. He's an entrepreneur, speaker, podcast host of top-rated show Growth Now Movement. And most importantly, he is a good human helping other good humans make impact in this world. How could he not be my new best friend? Let's welcome Justin Scheck to the show. Justin, welcome to No More Mondays.
Angie, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
You're welcome. Me too. We were in the green room before we came online. We were laughing about how we think we've seen each other on Zoom more than any other single human over the past month. And so it'll be fun to just continue this conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited. We just had you on the show, and our episodes might come out the same week, so it'll be like a trade-off of like they'll go listen to my episode, everybody will come listen to your episode, and it'll be good. And then we can have them rate us 1 through 5 who did better.
Oh, okay. So we just turned this into both a takeover and a competition at the same time. Is this a good point, by the way, to say go Eagles?
Yeah, go Birds. I love it. Now, we had a win back in 2018, which still kind of felt fresh, at least for Philadelphia, because we like taking a really long time between wins. But it was amazing, and I did not expect a blowout. That's for sure.
As you know, I kind of did. I was watching. Yeah, I grew up in Pittsburgh. Steelers fans are notorious for knowing the game very, very well. Also, by the way, also a Pirates fan. Speaking of droughts. So yeah. I think it's awesome. And I'm a huge fan of both Jalen Hurts and glad he got to win this time and love Saquon Barkley. So I was rooting for the Birds. And as a team, they've got great messages that totally tie into what we do in business. So I love the inspiration they're putting out into the world too.
Yeah, it's been a really fun team to watch, and the history record-breaking season for Saquon. Now it's hilarious because we all hated Saquon for how many years because he was a Giant, but now we're all gigantic fans of the man, and he seems to be happier than ever in Philadelphia.
Fair weather fans. So now on to entrepreneurship. So as Justin mentioned, I was on his show. So we're going to jump past the whole, we both hit rock bottom and somehow use that to grow a successful business from the depths of despair conversation. If you want to hear it, shameless plug, go listen to my conversation on Growth Now Movement podcast because it's there. So this will just be the continuation. But here's where I want to go. Knowing we both came from that place, I want to get into your head. What were you... I want to understand what you were thinking and telling yourself at that initial point of struggle when you were in that low place, trying to figure out what was coming next.
Yeah, it's interesting for me because obviously there were a couple of those rock bottom moments, right? Like obviously trying to get the business off the ground, being broke, getting fired from my day job when I was doing that and going, what do I do? And then COVID hitting and losing 75% of my income after I'd built this business. And going, what do I do? The reality is, I feel like part of me was too naive not to just make it work, right? Like it was almost like, okay, this is just another thing that's happening. How do I put together different pieces, right? And it also kind of goes back to like I was poor before I can be poor again. Like when I was a kid, I watched my mom's car get repossessed. Like I grew up poor, and now that I have money, I go, well, I could be poor again. And so I think that if you accept this idea of like it's all or nothing mentality, like it's a lot easier to take the steps forward.
Ooh.
Sorry, it looked like you were going to say something.
No, I think that's actually a fascinating. I almost want you to talk more about that because I think we live in a little bit of the it's all category, and we're never willing to even entertain that there could be nothing, and that most likely it's somewhere in the middle. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, I mean, nothing to me is very fresh in my mind, right? I experienced it many times in my life, and I know that it's a possibility again. what I don't think is a possibility, again, is for me to be employed by a company, because I figured out different ways to make it work. And so the one thing that I always did when my back was up against the wall was I literally invested in myself financially in order to move forward. And this is the piece most people miss. They go, once I get the money, then I'll invest in myself. Once I get to a certain place, then I can get a coach, or then I can join a mastermind, or then I can do this. When I was starting out, I had the opportunity to speak at an event right down in Orlando. This is before I got paid to speak. And I got fired from my job. And it literally came down to the moment of, okay, do I go speak at this event or do I pay my rent? And of course I made the smart decision, and I went and spoke at the event, and I was like, I'll figure it out, right? I'll figure out how to pay my rent. But the reality was, getting in that room with those people changed my life. I sat next to a guy named Mike Kim, who we had an in-depth conversation about how to really handle business, right? At the time, I owned a podcast production company like many podcasters own. And he was like, dude, you're literally right now, you're racing people to go broke in your business, because everybody's undercutting everybody to be the cheapest. You're going to go broke, but you're the only one doing it that was chosen by Inc. magazine as a top-rated podcaster. You need to get paid for that. And so I went home and I made $22,000 in 3 weeks, and I never looked back. And I realized that looking at things differently, it's impossible to get there unless people are helping you look at things differently, right? And then in 2020, when I lost 75% of my income, I hired a coach for $15,000 I didn't have at the time, to really completely change how my business works. I didn't know how to build an online course, which I ended up doing. No longer have it, but it was a great way for me to really kind of fight through that. Mm-hmm. Shifted a lot of things virtually, did a number of virtual events, which made me a lot of money, and really kind of shifted into this whole new world of like, oh, wait, hold on. My podcast is online. I guess my business could also be online. And I started to make money in different avenues online. And I realized that, again, if I didn't invest in myself when my back was up against the wall, then I would have nothing. And so might as well invest and move forward faster by having the right people around you.
If you want to know the entrepreneurial spirit is alive and well, look at someone who chooses going to an event over eating. Just going to leave that there.
Yeah, well, the good news is they gave you lunch at the event, so I did have some food.
2 birds, 1 stone.
That's it.
There's a piece in here that I particularly really love, because it's a big component of kind of the way I operate. And also, by the way, I did not bring Justin here as a shameless plug of why you need to hire a coach. However, it does reinforce this idea that I think that in the entrepreneurial space, especially when we're new in business, we tend to go it alone too much, either because we think we have to, or we can't afford not to, or various other slew of reasons. And in your case, that was literally the difference.
Yeah, it made a world of difference, right? I think there's a African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I didn't need the overnight massive success, right? So I was like, I want to build this for long term. And so I had to surround myself with the right people. I had to invest in myself. And without those coaches, I don't know where I would be. By the way, I've had coaches in every area of my life, in spirituality and relationships and my health. I've had coaches in all of these different areas at different times. Recently had an author coach, like all these things, in order to get better at these things that I'm not good at, because I want to move the ball forward. And, at the end of the day, like, we don't know when this is all going to end. So might as well enjoy that process, even when, your back is up against the wall. And honestly, you talk about these people who aren't ready, to surround themselves with the right people or get a coach. I think a lot of it, especially early on, is ego, right? There's so many people faking it till they make it, right? They're a broke entrepreneur who claims to be a life coach, who claims to have a 7-figure business. Well, they're actually too broke to invest in themselves. I was the opposite, where I was like, I'm really dumb. I don't know what I'm doing. Please help me, because I heard you are the right person to do that, right? And so a lot of my success in my life is because I stood on the shoulders of giants. And I realized that, like, learning from these people, making sure I had the right people in place, that's how I was able to move forward. Even when I didn't have the tools in order to do it, I just became really resourceful.
Well, and there's a humbleness there, right? Of saying, I know I don't know how to do this. And I think that it's important to keep that throughout your entrepreneurial journey, because it's very easy that if ego didn't exist at the beginning, it's going to come in at some point and you're going to say, I don't need anybody in my business. I don't need anybody looking behind my curtain. I don't want anybody up in my stuff. But it's actually to a detriment.
Yeah, and it happens all the time, and I've seen it happen. And honestly, when I was first starting out, I didn't realize the power of asking. I didn't realize the power of, hey, you're in the room with this person, make sure that you get to pick their brain, right? And that Mike Kim moment was like, I'm never missing that opportunity ever again. And I really, really focus in on building relationships. Like, people ask me all the time, like, how do you become friends with these big names that you've had on your podcast? I go, I don't expect anything from them. I give as much as I can, and I keep showing up for them whenever I can. And then from there, relationships happen. And that's how I'm like, my Rolodex of people is ridiculous because I focus in on giving and making sure that I'm building a relationship for the long term. Again, people are too short-sighted in business. They're like, well, how do I get? They're very transactional, right? Like, they get in a room with somebody with $1 billion and they go, how do I get some of that money? Versus like, how do I help him out or her out in order for them to make a bigger impact in the world, right? Because at this point, if you have billions of dollars, that's what your goal is. It's not to make more money. And so how can I support you in that process, right? And so people are way too short-sighted because they're so money hungry, or they so want that success that they've been dreaming about. But I promise you, if you look at it differently, if you look at it long-term and you build those relationships, the success happens on the back end.
The long haul, put away all need for instant gratification. It runs rampant in today's society and will not serve you as an entrepreneur. Because if you're sitting at a table with a businessman asking you how to get some of that money, you're losing out on his wisdom.
Yeah.
Which is worth infinitely more than any amount of pennies he would actually be willing to give you from his pocket. And I love this idea of thinking long-term as an entrepreneur, because one of the things I have witnessed is, over our journey, you even brought this up, that like, starting at the bottom, getting up, and then, having to fall back down and figure out how to get up. Entrepreneurship is growing a business is not linear. There are ups and downs. And then, and I call that the entrepreneurial mind bleep. I will not say the word because my mom is listening. Hi, Mom. And there's this essentially what I have considered this like baseline of equilibrium you have to find throughout the middle of those like highs and lows that really keep your eye on the prize of the long haul. Because if you're looking at like, oh, great, I got a deposit today, sweet, versus like, oh my gosh, I haven't gotten any money in 3 days, you're going to get off of that highs and low roller coaster. Like, you're either going to throw up on it or get off at the first stop. And so I find if you can establish some sort of baseline that keeps you consistent throughout that ups and downs, you can keep your eye on the long term. And I'm curious how you establish something like that for yourself. What's it look like? What's it sound like in your head when you're going through those highs and lows?
Yeah, so it's funny, when we talk about highs and lows of business, we think a lot about money. It's probably the number one thing people are going to think about when you think about highs and lows. To me, money is not a driving factor. Like, if I have a ton of money in the bank, I feel fine. And if I don't have a ton of money in the bank, I feel fine. Like, it doesn't affect me either way. But entrepreneur money is different than paycheck money. So I want to make that clear really quick. Like, when I was an employee, I spent everything that ever came in, because I was like, 2 weeks, another check, like, just spend it.
It just magically shows up in your bank account. You don't have to think about where it's coming from.
Exactly. And you don't pay taxes at the end of the year versus, you get some money back versus having to pay a ton of money. And so I look at it from a standpoint of like, just keep your nose down and stay focused on your purpose, right? If you're focused on your purpose, the rest takes care of itself. It's the idea that, hey, I want to build this new thing, right? I have a live event coming up in April, and it's, hey, how do I get more people in the room? It's not how do I pay for the venue? The venue's already paid for. The response is, well, how can I make a bigger impact? Meaning, how can I get more people in the room? And if you focus on that, the rest will take care of itself. And I think when things don't seem to be going right, people get so worried and get into that negative mindset of like, oh, everything's falling apart. Nobody's going to pay me money. I don't know how I'm going to pay rent. Guess what? You're going to live there if that's what you're thinking, versus like, okay, well, who can I impact today? How can I help somebody today get what they need, right? There's a quote. By the way, I mess up all quotes, but it's something along the lines of like, if you want to make more money, help more people get what they want. Yeah. Right. And that's just the reality, is like, if you're able to continue to stay in that mindset, you will be taken care of. They talk about it in The Secret, right? Like they mentioned, I think there's a story in there that they needed $15,000 or something. Like, they had to pay off a debt of $15,000, and they used The Secret, and all of a sudden $15,000 check came in the mail. Mm-hmm. I remembered when I was in that place where I was doing okay as an entrepreneur, but there were some months that were shaky, meaning like if the month was bad, I was like, maybe I'm going to hold off paying that bill, right? I realized that every time I was like, oh, that bill's $400. All of a sudden, a $400 payment got put into my bank account because I was focused on impact, not focused on how do I make more money? And I think if you stay in that lane, you're going to feel a lot more fulfilled every day, and you're not going to get into that negative mindset, if that makes sense.
There is scientific proof about the impact of positive thinking and abundance versus scarcity mindset. And also, as we're just going down the quotes rabbit hole that we're probably both butchering, is that idea that like everything shrinks or expands to fit the container. And I would even say to some extent that applies to this idea of like money out, money in, until you get to the point of like building a bigger wealth. But if you focus on a way to serve others, the money will come. And so I want to understand a little bit more. You brought up purpose and you brought up the why, which I'm so excited you did, because without knowing it, brother from another mother on the other side of Pennsylvania knew I wanted to talk to you about this. So I would love for you, what is your why? How did you find it? And how have you seen it serve you and impact others?
Yeah. So I believe my why is that I want people to look at me and essentially say, okay, well, if he can do it, I can too. But from the vein of, it doesn't matter where you come from. What matters are the choices you make today to make a better tomorrow for yourself and the world. Right. So again, that entire vision of making sure that it's bigger than you. Like, you are not the reason you're building what you're building. It's so much bigger than you. Especially in the self-development space, like people who do what I do, like doing events and retreats and all that stuff. Far too often that person has made it about themselves. They've made it about their celebrity. And I think I'm in a really good place not doing that, because gone is the way of the influencer, right? Like, I don't think the influencer thing still exists. And so for me, building about, like, my show is called The Growth Now Movement, because it's about creating a movement of people that can make a difference in their life and the lives around them. And so this purpose came from the idea that, 6 months before I launched my show, my mom lost a 20-year battle to opioids, and really began a rock bottom moment for me that lasted quite some time. I actually ended up going on a 3-month bender where I was blackout drunk 6 nights a week. And I remember I got a call from my coach, and she goes, "What are you doing tonight?" And I said, I'm going out with some buddies. And she goes, "No, you're not. You're going to sit and you're going to feel this." It was the worst night of my life. And I did this whole exercise where I wrote a letter to my mom and set it on fire, releasing a lot of emotions and allowing myself to feel all of these emotions for the first time since her passing. And when I woke up the next day, I had a number of realizations. First of all, there was a weight off my shoulder because I allowed myself to feel feelings. But the first realization was, my mom didn't die because she was an addict. My mom died because she didn't love herself. And the second piece was, I didn't love myself either. And part of loving myself was making sure I was taking care of myself, making sure that I was filling my cup first, making sure that I was doing the things to better myself so I can then impact others. And that's really where this purpose came from. It doesn't matter where you were. It doesn't matter even where you are today. What matters are the choices you make today to create a better tomorrow for yourself and the people around you. That first piece is yourself. And I say all the time, like, what's in your cup is for you, what overflows is for everybody, and fill the shit out of your cup. Like, you deserve to have great things. And that doesn't necessarily always mean money, by the way. Like, I ask a question on every single episode. I asked you, if people go listen to that episode, a 2-part question. First part is, what's your definition of success? Second part is, what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself? And I realized in that question was the common theme behind all the people that I've interviewed. Those 3 things are always to take care of themselves first. Right. And I came up with this thing, and I started saying it, which was like, the most selfless thing you can do is to be selfish, because if you're not taken care of, you can't help others. And that was a massive shift for me. I was really running on empty constantly. My romantic relationships constantly fell apart because of it, like all these terrible things. Right. And so once I really flipped the script on that, my business grew, my relationships got better. I found my wife. Like, all these things changed just by focusing on myself first, while still focusing on that purpose and that impact.
And it's strange, because we did bring up the word selfish earlier, but in a way, the most selfless thing you can do is prepare yourself to go give the world the purpose or the why that you're meant to give it. And you can't do that if you aren't strong enough. And like you said, the cup is not full. And I feel like you just gave a very real world example of something I tell a lot of people, which is, there is no better exploration into self-discovery than entrepreneurship. And it's because it put you in that place to become a more whole person and work through ugly stuff that was going to come in and disrupt your growth potential at some point, whether it was in that exact moment, real time, or a delayed response later. But it's what triggered the work that enables you to go, you made a difference in your life so that you can make a difference in others.
Yeah. And I think one thing too is like, that was a rock bottom moment for me, right? Like that was truly the rock bottom moment. It didn't mean hard things didn't happen after that. But what I did was, okay, I said to myself, I am no longer going to allow outside circumstances to determine the choices that I make and the things that I do on a daily basis. And that changed the game for me, because on the other end of that spectrum is somebody who hits a rock bottom moment, feels bad for themselves, might rebound a little bit, but then they hit the next rock bottom moment and the next rock bottom moment. And, and somebody like my mom, unfortunately, it was too late for her. Right. And so how can we define our rock bottom moment? And I always challenge people from a stage like, hey, right now is your rock bottom moment. Don't allow yourself to ever be affected by outside circumstances. Again, you can feel emotions, but don't allow it to change your course and your direction and the things that you want to do, because often we allow these outside noises and the outside things to affect us, right? Ed Milet says it best. He says, life is happening for me and not to me. That's even the bad. That's even
Took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah. Well, I think Ed was the first one to say it. Now everybody says it because it's true. It's true, right? If you can have that mindset of this is happening for me, it's rough at first when you start to practice that, right? Well, okay, if it's happening for me, then why did I grow up in the household that I grew up in? Why did my mom die when she was 58 years old after battling opioids for 20 years? Why? Right. And so you go, okay, well, why is that happening for me? The reality is, if that rock bottom moment didn't happen, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. And I wouldn't have impacted millions of lives through my show. Right. And I go back to pretty early on. This is when I realized that, okay, this is my vehicle. This is what I'm doing. And I have to keep using this medium of podcasting to make a difference. I was about 40 something episodes in when I set off in this podcast journey 9 years ago, back when people didn't even know what podcasts were. I was literally, nobody was listening, right? Like 40 people were downloading the show. And I didn't realize that at the time that was most shows. But I was having these conversations. I decided that I was going to do a year and see what happens. Right. And I was around episode 46. Nobody was listening. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to hit 52 and I'm done. I'm not going to do it anymore. And I ended up getting a message from somebody from Japan that said, because of your show, I decided not to take my life. And I realized that even if one person was listening, I'm going to show up. I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to stay true to this whole thing because I'm changing a life, which in my opinion, if you change a life, it changes the entire world. And so I kept showing up, and now 550, you'll be 555, I think. Right. So that idea of being consistent, my show has now grown to a place where it gets played in 100 countries every single week and all those things. But again, it was like that hard moment of like, I'm doing all this work and nobody's listening. I pushed through that moment because of my purpose. And then here we are on the other end where I get to do live events. I get to speak on stages all over the world. And it's truly just a blessing because I get to sit down and record and interview and build relationships with some of the coolest people. If I didn't have my podcast, I wouldn't know you. That's just the reality.
Which is one of my favorite things about podcasting is the community that I've been able to build. But I want to go back because there's some very insightful and important components to everything that you just mentioned. And I've started picking up on this while you and I would love to go help every entrepreneur out there not have to rise from ashes. In a way, I'm starting to pick up on the common theme that we all have a rock bottom we're meant to be in, because then we understand what a rock looks like versus what rubber is. And it helps us build resilience. And a lot of times it helps us identify that real why or that real purpose that would not have been as obvious, and we would not have been as committed or convicted in following had experience and insight and knowledge not come from a hardship. And I also think that those hardships tend to condition us and build the thick skin that we need in order to go put that purpose out there and know and trust that it's impacting people, even if we can't see it.
Yeah. People reach out to me all the time when they're going through hard times. And I think it's just part of the brand that I've built, and people feel like I can be a shoulder to crown, even though I'm a bruiser. And we could talk about that, the 5 people you need in your life, but I'm a bruiser, and I just call it like I see it. But I also know when to not be that person. And people will reach out and be like, nothing's going right. Everything's falling apart. My business isn't doing well. My marriage is not good. What do I do? And I literally say to most of those people, I go, congratulations, you're about to have a massive breakthrough. And I realize if without the breakdown, there is no breakthrough. Mm-hmm. You are literally, I don't care if you're, I'm a spiritual person, right? I literally believe it is the universe testing you to say, do you really want this? Because this is your test and you're going to push through it. Now that season may be short and that season may be long, but you have to be willing to ride it out and continue to stay focused on the right things in order to have the breakthrough. But again, you have to have that mindset of, hey, congratulations, you're about to have a breakthrough. And I believe it to be true.
I completely agree with you. And whatever your definition of the higher power universe is, I truly believe that we are, it's prepared. We're being prepared to do the thing that we're really, really meant to do. And it's interesting because, I'm a former engineer who loves people, which is the kickoff to my conversation with Justin, when he literally just goes, for an engineer, how do you have a personality? Which is, okay, go tune into the other episode to hear the answer to that. But for somebody who's very analytical, I also am very like intuitive and kind of like heart-centered. And you have a very similar aspect to that, because in some respects, a lot of what we're talking about is kind of like woo-woo. Oh, like know your why, know your purpose, go through rock bottom, build yourself back up, become the phoenix, and be prepared. The thing is, we see it time and time and time again. It's almost so common. It's become fact. And my big message is, I don't feel that you can truly live a satisfied, fulfilling, authentic life if you haven't discovered what the purpose is. Now, I hope that means you don't have to be at rock bottom in order to do it, but you can go seeking, and in seeking, ye shall find.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's true. Right. And I think you have to have that growth mindset in the first place. Like, that's the piece nobody really talks about. Like, you can't be cynical and successful. Like, you have to have a growth mindset in order to reach that next level. Like, I've had a number of people from The Secret on my podcast. Lisa Nichols was a client of mine. Like, these are like, I've been in proximity with the people who've truly put it into place. But here's the part that you don't see anymore, because The Secret was how old, but we're still talking about it. Like, it came out 2000 or something ridiculous, right? I don't think I ever read the book. I just watched the movie. But
we won't hold it against you.
Yeah, but here's the thing. They don't really talk about how they're still using it every single day, right? Like, Lisa Nichols was overweight, couldn't find love, and that's what she really wanted in her life. And she literally manifested by putting it out into the universe. This is what I'm looking for. A man who not only accepted her for who she was, but pushed her to be better. She's now insanely fit. I think she's 60. She's insanely fit. She's in a wonderful marriage. This is her using The Secret beyond this idea of money. One thing that we do in my mastermind is we literally build our life first, and then we figure out how to do your business second. A question that I love asking entrepreneurs, when we do hot seats or whatever, what's your financial goal this year? And they'll throw out $1 million. Okay. Why? I don't know. Nobody knows why.
Nobody knows why.
Money is not the driver. I go, okay, well, what do you want your day to look like? How many trips do you want to take? What kind of car do you want to drive? What kind of clothes do you want to wear? Like, are you a name brand person? Like, I'm not. I don't care. I'm literally on a hat and a hoodie right now, and so it's on brand though.
And it's a branded hoodie for any of you out there listening in podcast audio only land.
Like, I don't care about those things, but like, if I did, okay, cool. Like, my biggest expenditure of like fun things is cigars for me, right? And by the way, if you smoke good cigars are expensive. So you're like, okay, well, how many do I want to smoke a year? Figure it out. And then you figure out your dollar amount, and you realize it's not even close to $1 million. You can literally live the life that you want to live at $400,000 a year, work half the time you're expecting to. And look, hey, here's a bonus. You can do extra trips because you're not working your butt off all the time. Like, rewire your brain as far as how you're setting goals. And then the action becomes so much more exciting. It's so much better to step forward, right? Like, one of my daily non-negotiables is a 5 to 10 minute visualization practice. And it's usually onto something big. Like, right now, my big vision is like, what do I want this event to look like, sound like, smell like, feel like, all those things. And I bring myself there every single day. And what that does is it makes it easier for me to be the annoying guy to slide into your inbox and go, hey, did you get your ticket yet? Right? Like, it makes it a lot easier to do those hard things if you know what that vision is for yourself. If you've never seen $1 million in your bank account, you don't know what that feels like. But you know what it feels like when your loved ones are celebrating you for having big wins. You know what it feels like to go on vacation in the place that you love. You know what it feels like to be in a nice car and what it feels like to be surrounded by nice things. Vision that, and the action becomes a lot easier.
You have to know what you want the money to do versus just an arbitrary amount of money that sounds good because society says it's cool to be a millionaire.
Yeah.
Do you actually want the responsibility of that? Does it align with your values and your goals and your purpose and your why? And also, very practically, I have found whether it's a career or a business, our need is typically way lower than we assume it is once you actually reverse engineer the need and the lifestyle that it's going to support. And for those of you also out there on podcast audio only land, apparently this is a shameless plug to watch on video so that you can see what Justin's is wearing, but you could also see me jumping up and down when he, without me telling him to say it, says design your life first and then layer the career on that's going to support it. I have talked about that for years, and I'm still so refreshingly encouraged anytime I meet somebody who has that same perspective, because I feel that we don't take that agency and we don't make that choice. We accept circumstances too much and as if we just have to, and don't ever challenge that status quo to say, is this working for me? And is this intentional?
Yeah. And I'll say this, like, I don't have a 7-figure business, so I don't do 7 figures every year. And I don't want to, if it means I have to work more. Like, that's the one thing that I realize is that, like, I'm literally living my perfect life. I work 2 to 3 hours a day. I afford everything I want. We take 5 to 7 vacations a year. Like life is good, and I don't want to work more. Like, if I'm not that person. I thought I was, right? That young, hungry entrepreneur. I was like, I'm working sun up to sundown every day. Like, I'm going to get it. And it was great for that season, right? Because I wanted to be that person. But now I'm like, I've got a great wife. I've got 2 stepkids. I love my life. I don't want to be spending it in my office when they're out gallivanting around. Like, I want to spend time with them. And so, you know, I think sometimes we have to check our values before we set goals. A lot of times, again, like you said, society. Oh, society says you should be a millionaire. Society says you should have a 7-figure business. I don't care. Like, I want to live the life I want to live, and then I'll figure out the rest, right? And I think that's the true beauty of entrepreneurship that most people don't talk about. Yep. Because you get so caught up in this, like, I need to be working all the time thing, and it's BS.
It becomes a little bit of like entrepreneurial martyrdom syndrome. And there's a time and place. That's the other thing, though, is we easily can fall into this flip side that, like, oh, I'll go be an entrepreneur because then I can only work 2 or 3 hours a day, 3 days a week. Yeah, you did grind it out for several years to build the thing that then aligned with life. And so there's also seasons to some of this but if you know what you're working towards and why you're working towards it, it's easier to identify once you get there. So I want to flip the script on you for a sec. What is your definition of success, and what are 3 things you do daily to take care of yourself?
Yeah. So my definition of success, it's funny because it actually is probably the most common definition that somebody gives me. But it is what mine is as well, is to do what I want, when I want, with whom I want. Right. And that sounds so arbitrary, but that means you've built the life that you want, and you're surrounded by the people that you want, and you get to do everything that you want, which is crazy. Right. And I actually have 4 non-negotiables every day. And I'll share them with you. The first one is I move my body in some way, shape, or form. Like this morning, I walked 2 miles. Like, so it all depends on what the day looks like, but move my body in some way, shape, or form. Second thing is I learn something new every single day, whether that's reading a book, listening to a podcast, watching a YouTube video, whatever. I learn something new every day because I believe what's not growing is dead. The third thing is I mentioned earlier, the visualization practice, because you need to know where you're going, right? And there's actually a powerful tool. You can actually use AI to get really, really clear on your long-term vision. And I forget what the prompt was, but we did it in one of our mastermind gatherings when we were together, and people were crying. Like, it gets super clear and it gives you a true visualization. So if you're somebody who can't visualize things, use AI as a tool. But the third thing is a visualization practice. And then the fourth thing is I reach out to somebody I care about every single day and just check on them. And a lot of times it's like, well, Justin, that's not for you. That's for other people. But the reality is, like, me knowing that I can be there for people, even if it's a simple text, be like, yo, I know you're going through this. I hope you're all right. Hey, I hope you're recovering from that illness. Hey, I saw this, whatever, just checking in. That's a huge, powerful thing. And then rarely now is there a day that goes by, because I've been doing it for so long, that somebody doesn't check on me. And it's become this really cool thing. And every time I tell somebody that, they're like, oh, I'm going to use that. I'm going to start doing that. I don't know how long they do it for, but it's become a great practice in my life that's truly made a difference. And so those are my 4 non-negotiables every day.
I particularly love the fourth one because I feel like the first 3 are very similar to mine. Was like move, eat good food.
Yeah.
And I think it was actually connect with people, because I'm super extroverted and love humans.
You did say that, and I was like, oh, that's one of mine. I don't think I said it during the interview, but I was like, that's a good one.
So now I realize that, and I feel like I really enjoy. I believe we're at a shift in society for many reasons of which I will not opine. However, I believe that because of different factors at play, combined with the time in which we are more disconnected than ever with the illusion of connectedness, real authentic relationships and purpose is going to be a secret weapon.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. And it, like with AI and all this nonsense, like I had somebody on the podcast. It's not out yet. I just interviewed her yesterday. But she helps people get on stages and speak. And she's like, speaking on live stages is going to be the game changer for entrepreneurs and business owners because of AI and everything being created in a click of a button these days. Content creation is so overdone now. And so how do we make it more human? Well, it's in person, speaking on stages, attending events, like all these things that are going to make a difference for businesses and business owners. And I was like, that's such a fascinating way to look at it. And like, I use AI to write my emails, and except for the ones I wrote yesterday, because they were like 7 words long, but like I can literally go to ChatGPT because I have so much information out on the internet, so much content. I just go write it in Justin Schenk's voice, and it sounds exactly like me. I'm like, this is an email that I would write, except I'd have to think. So this works really, really well. But when you talk to somebody on a podcast, or you're creating this long form content, or you're speaking on a stage in person, like that's the thing that's going to set you apart. And by the way, to speak to people who are overwhelmed by what's happening in the world. And by the way, we've been in overwhelm in some way, shape, or form for the last 5 years. Yeah. It's been since COVID, and when you've been inundated, I will tell you this right now: turn off your TV.
Yes.
Stop scrolling. Go outside in the sun, put your feet in the grass, whatever you got to do, and realize that it's overhyped. Like the world that you need to control is right in front of you. Worry about your house, worry about your family. Don't worry about all the noise, because I've been there. I've done the doom scroll. Mm-hmm. It was awful. And I was like, I need to get myself out of this. And once I got myself out of this, I slept better. I had a lot less stress.
Yep.
I felt really good. And check on the ones you care about and make sure they're taken care of too. And if you do that, your life is going to be so much better. Turn off the damn phone.
Yep. Control what you can control is my mantra, and what I'm really encouraging others to do right now. And it's funny because years ago, I read the book Eat That Frog, which is a great productivity book. And literally in that book, Brian Tracy says, do not consume news because it is a kind of a waste of time. And so I had just been in a habit of consuming very, very little in that regard, but it's easy to fall back into doom scroll when everything becomes hyper realistic. And so I completely agree with that is disconnect and reconnect. And speaking of live events, you queued up yourself the perfect opportunity to talk about a little thing happening outside of Philadelphia in just a few weeks.
Yeah. So I'll say this. I always like to tell the backstory of where Growth Now Summit Live came from. I realized like I started to build success with the podcast. I got all this notoriety, and I started interviewing some of the greatest minds in business and life. You're talking people, Ed Milet, Gabby Bernstein, Fabio Viviani, keep going down the list. Bert Kreischer, the comedian. I got to sit down with these people and have conversations and learn from them and build relationship. And I was fortunate enough that I was on this list of top 8 podcasts by Inc. magazine that got me this opportunity, that got me this audience. There aren't many people that get that opportunity in life. And I was like, well, how do I bring what I get to do every single day to other people? And so Growth Now Summit Live was born in the idea of, yes, they're incredible speakers, but there's no red velvet rope. You are literally just in the room with them. They are you, you are them. Like it is exactly what it is. And it's become an amazing thing to see all of this connection. And what I realized this time around is that so many people that have been on my podcast and have previously keynoted my events, they're coming to the event. They bought tickets and they're coming to the event. Like this room is literally going to be the most stacked room of thought leaders, driven people who are motivated to not only grow themselves, but help other people grow. Right. And that's the power of events. It's not, look, you're going to remember 10% of what's said on stage. We're going to make sure we entertain the shit out of you. You're going to have a great time. You're going to learn things, but you're going to retain about 10%. But what's going to be lasting is the relationships that are built, the businesses that are built off the back end. There are people that met at my event in 2019 who are still friends. There are people that met at my event in 2019 who have businesses together, because it's all about showing up, shaking hands, making relationships happen. So I encourage people, actually, as of the recording of this, there's only 10 VIP tickets left. But if you can, get a VIP ticket because you get to mingle with the speakers and everybody the night before the actual event. And then April 4th is the main event where, keynote speakers, a sit-down conversation, some panels throughout the day, subject matter experts, and a ton of fun along the way in Westchester, Pennsylvania. So if people are interested, they can go to growthnowsummit.com. And here's what I say all the time. Like, come check out the event. Come hang out with us. Come give us a hug because Angie's going to be there. And come hang out with us and go on this journey with us. People ask me all the time, how do I get on your podcast? How do I get on your stage? I go, show up and come on the journey with me and it'll happen. I guarantee it. Like, that's all you have to do. So hopefully they come hang out.
So for all of my Pittsburgh friends listening to this, head on over to the Turnpike on April 4th and come see us in person because you're going to want to be in the room where it happens is essentially what's going on here. I'm super stoked.
Yeah. And by the way, I know it's a dreadful drive down the Turnpike. I know it is. It's the most boring 4-hour drive of your life, but it'll be worth it. And shout out, I've said this to you one of the first times we talked. Shout out to Pittsburgh, one of the most underrated cities in the country. I absolutely adore Pittsburgh. I love it. The people are so kind, right? They always say Philly's the city of brotherly love. I believe that Pittsburgh is the friendliest city in Pennsylvania, without a doubt, right? And so shout out to Pittsburgh, but come hang out in Westchester.
Yeah, why not? Literally, I'm going back east for it. And it's always fun to just reconnect with Pennsylvania roots. And this has been an awesome conversation. We'll be sure to link the event information in the live, in the show notes, all the things. It's on Facebook. You're going to want to be there. I'm going. I've got some friends going because I'm just a hype girl now. So I'm excited and taking, as we talk about relationships, just as we kind of wind things down, as we talk about relationships, I've been fortunate to build some really amazing virtual relationships, but there's nothing quite like when they turn into IRL. So there you go.
I love it. Angie, this has been great. Thank you so much for having me.
Justin, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your wisdom and your story. I think it's really important that people hear that you can overcome circumstances and make your message. And one of the things I love about conversations like this is the reminder that success is never about money. It's making a difference in your life so you can impact the lives of others. So it's just that simple, folks. Justin Scheck, thank you again for joining me on No More Mondays. And for all of you out there listening, thank you for spending time with us today. And I will see you next week for another episode of No More Mondays podcast.